Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me today. I'm Lisa Chin. I'm the CEO at Treehouse. And today I have the pleasure of speaking with Jim Sinegal, co-founder of Costco and a longtime supporter of Treehouse and so many educational causes. Today we're going to talk about education and some of the more pressing issues that are facing youth, especially youth experiencing foster care who we serve, and the challenges that they're seeing in these current times with completing their education. So please put some questions for us in the comments section, because we would love to hear from you and answer any questions that you're curious about. And with that, I'd like to ask, Jim, can you take just a second to introduce yourself?
Of course, Lisa. Hi, everybody. I'm Jim Sinegal, co-founder of Costco Wholesale, retired CEO of the company.
Thanks, Jim. You know, before we begin our conversation, and I always enjoy our conversations so much, we both want to take a moment of silence to honor George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Tony McDade, Ahmaud Arbery, and too many other Black and African American lives that have been stolen at the hands of police and racist violence. Treehouse stands in solidarity with those who have been impacted by this targeted violence. We believe in long-term sustained action to dismantle and rebuild systems that are falling and failing our Black and brown youth, our friends and community members. Let's just please take a moment of silence right now. Thank you. Thank you. So, Jim, it is my distinct pleasure to see you again. The last time you and I were together, we spent some time at Bellevue College's commencement, where you were our commencement speaker. I know that you've been so committed to leveling the playing field for youth in foster care for such a long time, and that this dates back to your career at Costco and your longtime support of Treehouse. You even spoke at our Champions Luncheon. I think it was a little while ago, a few years ago. Can you share with our audience a little bit about why you feel so strongly about advocating for youth in foster care?
Well, I'll try to, Lisa. To begin with, I spoke initially at a breakfast, and then a year or so later at a luncheon. But I spoke at a breakfast. The spouse of one of our executives at Costco asked me if I would agree to come and speak at a breakfast for Treehouse. And of course, I didn't know anything about Treehouse at that point. And she told me it was for foster kids. And so I said, well, when's the event? And she said, well, when can you be there? And so obviously it took away any leverage that I had to say that I couldn't make it on that particular day. I went down and visited Treehouse prior to the breakfast, of course, so I'd have a little more knowledge about what was happening. And I was aghast at some of the stories that I heard in the course of meeting with Janice and her staff at the facility. And so I heard the stories about how oftentimes when these children have to be nabbed out of a hostile situation, they literally go in with a trash can liner and gather up the things that they would expect to take with them as quickly as they could, because they have such a limited period of time. A very touching story. And so at the luncheon, I had, I suppose there was probably or at the breakfast, about 200 people there. I put trash can liners on every table. And I explained to them, I said, imagine what happens to a child, 5 or 6 or 7 years old, when they're asked to take everything that's precious in their life and put it into a trash can liner at a moment's notice. And now think as an adult how we would respond if we had to do that with the trash can liner that we have sitting on there. And I thought that was kind of a compelling story that was told to me by the staff at Treehouse. And of course, at that time, I also was introduced to a prop that they had, and perhaps it's still there, Lisa, which was a suitcase that they had And they told the story about a volunteer who had been walking through the neighborhood in Bellevue and saw that there was a garage sale. And in the course of seeing the garage sale and looking and perusing what was there, she noticed that there was some luggage. And of course, luggage is a big deal for these foster because oftentimes they're dealing just with the trash can liner that I mentioned previously. So she asked the fellow who was running the show what he was asking for the luggage. And she introduced herself being with Treehouse in the foster kids program. And he said, well, just a second. And he left and he went inside the house and he came back out a few moments later and he had this ragged piece of luggage. And she thought to herself, oh my God, don't tell me he wants me to have that. She was looking at some of the stuff that was very nice that was sitting out there. And then he explained to her that he and his sister had been foster kids. And that piece of luggage was what bound the two of them together over the many years that they were transported and changed from one home to another, that they put their belongings in that suitcase. And he gave it to Treehouse at that point. So he told the story about the suitcase. And so I was sold at that point when I started hearing stories like that, that how can you not want to help and support what's happening to these children and the difficulties that they go through.
Thank you so much, Jim. That, yes, the suitcase is still at Treehouse. And it's a good reminder that for the youth that we serve, they often have nothing except for that trash can liner or that suitcase and very few belongings when their placements are shifted sometimes at a moment's notice. So thank you. I so appreciate your sharing of that heartfelt experience that you've had. You know, it's I know that education is very, very important to you on so many levels and at so many organizations, and that you've even founded a scholarship at San Diego State University that provides funding to cover tuition specifically for youth in foster care. Thank you for doing that, Jim. That's incredibly generous of you. Can you tell us a little bit about the history of that scholarship and when it started, and if appropriate, maybe some of your favorite stories about kids graduating?
Well, San Diego State University is where both Janet, my wife, and I went to school, and we got re-engaged with the university about 20 years ago and established a scholarship program for deserving disadvantaged kids who were trying to get their education degree. Janet had gotten her degree as a teacher at the university, and so we set it up as a Janet Sinegal scholarship program at the university. And as we went on, after a couple of years, we saw that the president of the university, a fellow by the name of Steve Weber, was very enthusiastic and supportive of a foster kids program that they had at the university called the Guardian Program. And he introduced it to us, and he was so enthusiastic about it that we decided to enhance our giving to the, and increase our giving to the university to include that Guardian Program. And so I think now we've been making contributions to the Guardian Program for probably about 15 years. They are very supportive of the foster scholars that they have at the university. They have great results. As a matter of fact, just a few years ago, the student body president of San Diego State University, which is a large university, some 45,000 students at the university. He was the student body president, Josh Morse, I believe, and I think he intends to go to law school. He's graduated. I think he's taking some time off. He's going to be a surfer dude for a year, and then perhaps continue his education from there. So they get great results, and it was really born from the fact that the president of the university was so enthusiastically supportive of it, and we kind of got caught up in in his enthusiasm and the fact that it was a program that deserves support.
Great story. I think I cut you off, Jim. Did you have earlier? Did you have a question for me?
Well, you became the president of and the director at Treehouse April 1st, about the time that we were smack in the middle of this meltdown and quarantine. How have you dealt with this, and how have you and your team been able to function through this very troubling period?
Well, Jim, thank you for asking that. These are definitely with the times that we find ourselves in are unprecedented on just about every level. But I will say this, that starting as a new CEO of a statewide organization in the middle of a pandemic, now compiled with the uprising and everything that we're seeing in our country, has been not something that I or anyone else would have predicted. And the crises that we're seeing right now are our youth, the youth that we serve, face this level of crisis every single day. And what we're now experiencing collectively has made an even greater impact on their lives. And I wouldn't rather be anywhere else than with this group of very dedicated people who are looking to change the world, to support our young people to have the lives that they want, to eliminate barriers to their success, to eliminate barriers to their educational goals. And so it's certainly been challenging, as you pointed out. And again, I wouldn't rather be anywhere else than working with one of our most vulnerable populations with a great group of dedicated people and supporters like yourself. So thank you. I very much appreciate that question. And that this, whenever you and I have the chance to speak, I really enjoy our conversations. And you and I have talked even more about Treehouse and our statewide service and some of the service that we provide east of the mountains. And I know that you are passionate about that area, and I was hoping you could tell me a little bit more about your involvement with another educational institution, about Heritage University. And if you could share with me a little bit more about your work there, why you got involved, and your thoughts on alleviating barriers for our underserved communities, I would love to hear more.
Well, I was first introduced to Heritage University, I guess about 22, 23 years ago. It was started by a Catholic nun, Sister Kathleen Ross. It's a secular school. It's not associated with the Catholic Church. However, it does get some support from the Archdiocese because Sister Ross is a Catholic nun. I went over and visited the university, had a brief visit there, really kind of lost touch with them for a period of time, and was encouraged by some people in the community to make another trip over here about 5 years ago to visit the university again. They asked me if I would go, and I said, well, I've been there, but I'm certainly happy to go. So went over, and when I was making a tour through the university, there were 6 people there who are Costco employees who work in our IS department at Costco. And they were all graduates of Heritage University. And they greeted me there, and each of them took me on a tour specifically of buildings and facilities at Heritage. And they were so proud of the university. And for a little background, the university is on an Indian reservation in the Yakima Valley there, just outside of Yakima. The population of the university is 97% Latino and Native American. Almost all of the graduates there and the students there have been the sons and daughters or grandsons and granddaughters of farm workers in the valley. Almost all of them have had to spend time working in the fields themselves with the crop and with the harvest. And the enthusiasm that these students had, and our employees, the people that were working for Costco, had was very compelling. And so I set up a scholarship program there. And I told them, I said, we're going to provide a scholarship for 5 students every year. And I took it out for 8 years. 5 students, but you guys are going to have to help me pick the scholars. And so we're going to ask for applications, and you're going to have to do the interviewing, and you're going to have to make the decision on who you think is deserving of those scholarships. Well, they have been fantastic. They have participated in it. We've had events over at the university. We've had dinners. We're on our, I think, our 4th cohort of people who will be getting scholarships, and we will continue the program. But the inspiration for the whole thing were the 6 employees that we had working for us who had gone through the school, who had experienced all the hardships that you can imagine relative to their lifestyle and their family backgrounds. And so I have to give them all the credit. They inspired me to do it. I wouldn't have done it if it hadn't been for them.
Thank you, Jim. That's so inspiring to hear that. I so appreciate that story. We do have a question in our chat, a question from Lindsay on Facebook. And her question is, education and higher education are such important tools for our youth to be successful in achieving their goals and dreams. With the past 3 weeks, many white donors are looking for ways to become allies for our youth. What are ways each of you have reflected on or started to take action to amplify resources for Black youth in care? So Jim, if you wouldn't mind, I'll give my answer to that, and then feel free to chime in. So what are we doing to amplify resources for Black youth in care? We at Treehouse, we're looking at more and deeper partnerships, both in terms of advocacy down in Olympia. We're looking at other organizations like Black Lives Matter, for example, and looking at what their priorities are. So where Treehouse advocates for halting the foster care to prison pipeline, we know that our colleagues at Black Lives Matter are talking about halting the school to prison pipeline. So there's potential for us to partner there around advocating more down in Olympia and advocating more loudly and more publicly around the barriers that face our youth, especially our Black youth. So that's one example of that. We also have very frequent conversations and are amplifying those as well with our partners who run different agencies. So at the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction and also at the Department of Children, Youth, and Families, we're working more closely even to look at more ways that we can provide better and better services and support for our Black youth. So anything you would like to add, Jim?
Well, you may recall, Lisa, about 20 years ago, a little over, I think it was 21 years ago, there was an initiative passed in the state of Washington which did away with affirmative action. Affirmative action as it applied to the seats in universities, to contracts for government work, et cetera. And about that time, Costco had received a kind of a gift from a supplier of $1 million that we could put to any charity that we wanted. Well, my partner, Jeff Brotman, was on the Board of Regents of the University of Washington, and I was on the Board of Trustees of Seattle University at that time. And we saw this as a tremendous obstacle for qualified, disadvantaged kids getting into universities, specifically people of color. And so we set up a scholarship program at that point. We were going to have a breakfast to raise money. We thought that we had enough. We were going to use $250,000 a year for 4 years, and we expected to have the breakfast go on for 4 years. We were going to split whatever money was raised to be given evenly to University of Washington and to Seattle University for the purposes of awarding scholarships to these disadvantaged students who were very qualified to go to school, main obstacle being financial. So we've now been running that breakfast for 20 years, and I think that we have raised at this breakfast money that has gone to the university. I think it's over $55 million
Wow.
has gone to the 2 universities. And they have used it very well, and they have been incredibly supportive of this program.
Wow, thank you, Jim. That's really phenomenal. That's $55 million. You said that's fantastic. So thank you for that. As I think we have time for just one more question here, and I wanted to stay on our track of education. High school graduation, we talked a lot about post-secondary and your involvement there, but high school graduation this year is looking so different from any memory that any of us have about our own high school graduations. Today, Treehouse is doing graduation spotlight later on in the afternoon, and we're showcasing 2 of the 2020 grads and giving them the opportunity to tell their stories, just as you and I have had a chance to share our stories here. I'm really super excited to watch it, and if you have the time, I invite you to be there, invite everyone in our Facebook audience to participate. I was hoping that you could give us some advice here as we think about how different this high school is, and that none of these youth will have the experience of walking across the stage in the cap and gown and really celebrating that moment. What do you think, what can we all do to support our graduating seniors who don't get to walk across that stage?
Well, several of us were reflecting, we were meeting the other day and reflecting on this, and in truth, most of the consensus of about 3 or 4 of us that were talking was that high school graduation is actually more important than college graduation from an emotional standpoint. It is a coming of age, if you will, for kids, and they're missing the prom, and they're missing all the activities, all the friends, and many of their friends that have gone to school with them, not just for 12 years. Some of them started in preschool and went through. They've been together for sometimes 14 and 15 years in the educational process. So this is a very emotional thing. And I've got a granddaughter now who's going to be a senior this year. And obviously that's a major concern for her. I mean, she's thinking about it, and she's kind of melancholy about what's happening and how school is going to get started again. I can tell you that at San Diego State, we just did a virtual commencement. They asked several of us who were alums to make statements to the students. The president of the university spoke to the students, and the student body president spoke. It was interesting. The president of the university is a woman, Latina, and the student body president is African American. And they spoke as well as some of the alums, and they tried to make it as much of a commencement as they could. And I think they did a pretty good job of pulling it off on very short notice. My guess is that this next year they'll be better at it. Everyone will have a chance to practice it, but does not change the fact that you're taking away a very real and meaningful experience for these young people. So anything we can do to enhance that is in their best interest, and probably in our best interest as well.
I couldn't have said it better, Jim. Thanks so much for those nice words. And I just wanted to share that, yes, a lot of our youth who are graduating this year still need that level of support and access. You know, they still need us to be there for them as they continue this important transition period from high school to college. So Jim, I just want to say we're just about out of time here. I want to thank you again for being a longtime supporter of Treehouses and for everything that you've done to support young people through their educational processes. And congratulations to your granddaughter. And again, just wanted to say thank you. Any last words for our audience and for our graduating youth?
Well, I want to say a couple of things. First of all, Lisa, I'm delighted to know that you're going to be in charge there. And I mean that sincerely. I have a lot of confidence in you, and it will certainly encourage me to be as supportive as I can be of Treehouse. So congratulations, but it's a big break for Treehouse as well. They have had solid leadership, and you're just going to continue that into the future. I can say only that support of the foster kids is a very compelling story. I would encourage anyone in the audience who doesn't understand or hasn't seen some of the statistic and know some of the facts about what happens with these foster kids to acquaint yourself with them. It is, as I suggest, a very compelling story for support. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jim. And thank you everyone for joining us today on Facebook Live. If you can, please check out the Celebrate Our Grads video, and please attend our graduation spotlight later today. And thank you again to Jim Sinegal, co-founder of Costco, for joining us. Take good care, everyone.